Patch 2.0 of Zenless Zone Zero is less than 24 hours away, which means a lot of things. Aside from all the new content, there will also be some new banners featuring the new limited unit Xuan, as well as some banner reruns for some older characters that some might consider some of the best in the game, and also a free standard S-rank selector. So, whether you are a brand new player to the game or someone who's a bit lost on who to pull for, hopefully this video will highlight several agents that everyone should be keeping an eye out for. Now, I mentioned that this video is also for some brand new players that are completely lost on who to even think about upgrading. I get it, there's a lot. So first, I'd like to take a moment to shine a spotlight on two A-rank standard characters that everyone should be trying to upgrade, no matter if they're new or a veteran. The first A-rank is going to be Nicole, an ether supporter. You actually get her right from the start of the game, so you don't even need to worry about pulling her. Now, as a support, Nicole herself won't have much personal damage, but what she offers to the rest of the team kinda makes her better than a handful of S ranks in the game. Nicole's core passive causes her attacks to reduce enemies' defense by up to 40% once it's at max level. This is huge, and all you have to do is attack the enemy with Nicole. Now, this debuff only lasts for 3.5 seconds, but some of her main attacks that you'll be using, so her EX special, her chain attack, and her ultimate, all shoot out energy fields that actually linger on the field for a few seconds, meaning that this buff lasts longer than the listed 3.5 seconds. Now honestly, this 40% defense shred alone is great. But if you pair her with somebody else from the Cunning Hares or an ether agent, then not only will she shred through 40% of enemies' defenses, but your team's ether damage will also be increased by 25% against those same enemies. And not to spoil anything just too soon, but one of the newest limited agents, Xuan, is also an ether agent. And then, because Nicole is an A rank, although it won't happen instantly, you will be able to get copies of Nicole to increase her Mindscape over time. And what you're really looking for is her Mindscape 6. Since on top of the defense shred that she provides and the increased ether damage for the team, at Mindscape 6 she now also provides up to 15% increased crit rate. So as a support, Nicole is great, and she's also easy to build. Your main concern will be to get her core skill to rank F to make sure that you're shredding as much defense as possible. And honestly, that's pretty much it. As for her disc sets, if you equip her with the Astral Voice, she will also provide another source of damage buff to the team whenever a quick assist is performed. And then starting out as just a base general good Nicole build, trying to squeeze in some energy regen is also nice so that you can use her EX special more often, keeping some higher uptime on that buff. That's not the only A-rank support though, because the next one is Lucy, an A-rank fire supporter, who also has a fairly simple buff which provides attack to the rest of the team. Not only that though, but Lucy can also contribute a small amount of damage herself even while she is off field, because her three little boars will continue to attack the enemy throughout the battle. Lucy's buff provides a maximum of 600 attack to the team for either 10 seconds or 15 seconds depending on if you hold down her EX special. Now, Lucy isn't as easy to build as Nicole though, as the value of this attack buff is actually dependent on Lucy's own attack. The way it works is that her EX skill adds a flat amount as well as a percentage of Lucy's attack to this buff. So the higher Lucy's skill level and her own personal attack is, the higher the attack buff will be. But it will never exceed 600 though. But to be fair, this is actually kind of a great thing, because investing in Lucy's own personal stats not only increases this attack buff, but her three boars actually inherit the attack and crit stats from Lucy herself. And the higher Lucy's core skill is, the more of her own attack is transferred over to the boars. So Lucy will essentially just switch onto the field every now and then just to use her EX skill in order to apply the attack buff to the team. Meanwhile, her boars will just contribute to damage over time. But as you get Mindscapes though, Lucy gets better and better. The most important one for her is Mindscape 2, since now, launching a chain attack or an ultimate will also provide the attack buff to the team. So you go from having only one way to apply the buff, which was her EX skill, to now having 3 different ways to apply the buff. This is great, because if you play things correctly and space out your attacks, you will essentially have permanent uptime on this attack buff. Mindscape 4 then lets the buff also provide a small crit damage bonus, and Mindscape 6 causes Lucy's boars to contribute even more damage. Once again, Lucy is built quite similarly to Nicole, wanting Astral Voice to not only increase her own attack, but also to provide another source of damage buff to the team. And then until you get Mindscape 2, you'll likely also want to invest in some energy regen with either Swing Jazz as a 2-piece set or energy regen on slot 6, since that will help you keep up her buff. by spamming her EX attack. But those were the A ranks though that hopefully everyone watching here either has built already or will be building soon after this. But next, what about that S rank selector that we're all going to be getting? Who should you use that on? Of these 6 standard S ranks, there's really only 2, maybe 1.5 that you should be considering. The first is Lycaon, the Ice Stunner. In some teams, or for some DPS agents, they really want the enemy to be stunned since that is when they can start dishing out a lot of damage. Because during this stun window, enemies will take 50% more damage than when they aren't stunned. And so, in these cases, the amount of damage you do depends quite a bit on how fast and how consistently you're able to stun the enemy. So of the 3 standard stunners that you have available to you, Lycaon is arguably one of the best when it comes to consistently stunning the enemy. Not only that, but it can also further increase the damage that the enemy takes while stunned from a bonus 50% to a bonus 85% thanks to his team passive, which activates whenever another team member is an ice type or if they are from the Victoria Housekeeping faction. And if you happen to have any ice types in the team, they will also benefit from Lycaon applying a 25% ice shred on enemies. So basically, a near permanent 25% damage increase for any ice types in the team, including Lycaon himself. As a stunner, it's also relatively easy to build Lycaon too, since the only real stat that you want is impact. And there's only one fixed way to obtain impact, and that is the main stat on slot 6 of your drive discs. So there's no need to worry about substat rerolling there. And then for the actual disc set, Shockstar Disco is great because it gives impact and also further increases the stun done by basic attacks, which Lycaon will be doing very often. But speaking of Victoria Housekeeping though, the other S rank to keep an eye out for is Rina. Although this is with a tiny grain of salt. Rina is somewhat similar to Nicole because she provides a penetration buff to the team, which is kind of like a defense shred. The issue is that the amount of penetration is dependent on Rina's own penetration stat. So, it's not like a guaranteed amount like Nicole. The big catch though with Rina, and why I say that you should take this recommendation with a grain of salt, is that at Mindscape 0, when you first get her, getting the most out of her buff is going to be a lot harder than Nicole or Lucy. Firstly, penetration as a stat on discs is a little bit harder to come by, so that makes building Rina a little bit more difficult. And also, the way that she applies the buff is by simply attacking the enemy, because that will send out her 2 little bang boo puppets that will remain on the field for a small period of time. However, because of how short this period is for the puppets to stay out on the field, and because of how long some of Rina's attack animations are, realistically speaking, you only ever get 1, maybe 2 seconds of actually being able to make use of this penetration buff. Now, this is actually somewhat made a little bit better once you get her to Mindscape 1, because then her buff will be extended by an additional 5.5 seconds, and it also increases the amount of penetration that can be provided by the buff. But that does require you to get a second copy of Rina, which technically speaking will eventually happen since she is on the standard banner, but I wouldn't recommend you get your first copy of her now just to hope that you stumble into another copy of her later on in life. However, if you do happen to have 1 copy of her already, you could maybe consider getting another copy to get that Mindscape 1, especially considering that the new class being introduced features a mechanic that allows you to ignore defense completely. So it's likely that to promote this new class, we will see enemies with much more defense now in game. And penetration and defense shreds will likely become quite valuable now moving forward then. But speaking of the new class, let's move on to the limited characters. First up, the star of the patch, Xuan. Being a Rupture agent and being a very special type of ether element, Xuan is considered to be on par with Miyabi, who was a Void Hunter released almost 7 months ago. And yet, despite being 7 months old, Miyabi is still relevant in content to this day. If you play other MiHoYo games, think of Xuan as like an Archon from Genshin Impact or a Emanator from Honkai Star Rail. Basically, Xuan is going to be a pretty big deal. As mentioned, she will also possess a new mechanic that lets her completely ignore enemy defense to do true damage. And so far, she is the only character in the game who will be able to do this. For now. It's very likely that we will be getting more Rupture agents down the line, but who knows when that will be. Also, the fact that she is an ether element, albeit a slightly altered version of the ether element, is also nice because 1, she will have some nice synergy with the previously mentioned Nicole, who everyone will have, but also, of the 5 elements in Zenless Zone Zero, the devs themselves have gone on record to say that ether is a special element in their eyes. So these types of agents would be harder to come by. So who knows when next we will get another strong Ether DPS agent like Yi Shen. If you're starting out fresh in the game and you just want someone who will deal big damage and be able to go toe-to-toe against some of the endgame content, albeit after some investments, then Yi Shen is very likely going to be that agent for you. But as for the other limited characters, the ones getting reruns in patch 2.0, I want to bring them up because they are Astra Yao and Caesar King. Two very good supporters, we'll say, in quotation marks, but they are definitely not going to be doing as much damage as Yi Shen, but they are definitely some characters worth considering. First is Astra Yao, an Ether supporter, and by now you've probably already realized that supporters are pretty good in this game, and Astra is no exception. Remember when I said that Lucy was great because at Mindscape 6, she provided an easy attack buff and a crit buff, as well as doing some decent personal damage? Well, Astra takes all of that and cranks it up to 11. Firstly, Astra's core skill, which you should definitely upgrade to core skill F, converts 35% of her own attack into a buff for the rest of the team, including Astra herself. This goes up to a maximum of 1200 bonus attack. So at core skill F, you want Astra to have 3429 attack to get this maximum bonus. But here's the thing though, you give this buff to the team so easily. Once Astra uses her skill for the first time, it essentially becomes a two-man show between the other two agents on the team. However, whenever Astra gets enough energy, you can perform a quick assist between those two agents to switch the other one in, refreshing the buff and causing Astra to dish out her own little attack from the sidelines. But that's not all. Throughout this entire time that Astra remains like this off-field, she also just flat out increases the whole squad's damage by 20%, as well as the entire team's crit damage by 25% once her special attack is upgraded to level 12. The amount of buffs that Astra herself provides to the team is ridiculous, but then you can combine that with her best disc set, which is the Astral Voice, which gives another damage buff whenever a quick assist is performed. And because Astra's whole gimmick is letting you spam quick assists between those other two agents, you can very easily stack this disc effect to get another 24% damage bonus. All of this on a very easy to use and easy to build agent. All you have to do is get Astra to 3429 attack, and then after that you can invest into energy regen. And you don't even need her signature engine to achieve any of this. Then all you have to do is, once you're in battle, use her skill once, and that's it. You'll pretty much have near permanent uptime on all of these buffs so long as you're making sure to use quick assists, which you will be able to do a lot. And then, although her banner is only coming in about 3 weeks time, the other rerun character is Caesar King, who is technically speaking a defender, but don't let that fool you. She is so much more. She is like a supporter and a stunner in disguise. The reason I call her a supporter is because, like Astra and Lucy, she can provide an attack buff and a big one too, providing 1000 attack once you upgrade her core skill to F. But a very nice quality of life that Caesar provides is that she gives your team a special shield that not only stops damage, like a regular shield would, but it also makes you uninterruptible. So if you happen to miss a dodge or a parry, don't worry about it. You won't get hit out of your combo. But not only does she increase your damage through this attack buff, Caesar can also apply a debuff to enemies whenever she parries them, which causes them to take 25% more damage. And trust me, you'll be wanting to parry a lot with Caesar, because that's where her pseudo-stunner gameplay effect comes into play. You see, Caesar has a big focus on impact. So when you perform a defensive assist where you switch into Caesar just before somebody else is about to get hit, not only does this counter do a decent amount of stun buildup, but Caesar can then follow up with an EX special for reduced energy cost, which does even more stun buildup, as well as refreshing that shield and thus the attack buff, and then also applying that 25% damage taken debuff to the enemy. And all of this just for a single parry, which requires very little amount of time. So eventually, on top of all of those other bonuses, you'll also end up stunning the enemy for even more damage too. And like many of the other supporting agents, Caesar is also very easy to build. Her attack buff is only dependent on her core skill level and no other stats. So just focus on getting her to core skill F. And then you can also upgrade her assist and special attack skills for the increased stun buildup. And as for actual stats, as long as you have her on impact disc on slot 6, you'll be fine. As for the sets themselves, you can put Protopunk on her for another 15% damage increase, and then Shockstar Disco to help further increase her impact. Now, of these limited agents, all 3 that I mentioned are great picks. But something to keep in mind is that, as great as Astra and Caesar are, I'd only really get them if you also have another DPS agent already to go along with them. There's not much of a point having all of these great supportive buffs if you don't have somebody that can actually use those buffs. And once again, it does seem like Yi Shen is likely going to be the the go-to DPS agent as we head into not just patch 2.0, but for the entirety of Season 2 of Zenless Zone Zero. So patch 2.1 all the way up to patch 2. Whatever. But hopefully though, this helped shed some light on which agents you should all be keeping an eye out for in patch 2.0 of Zenless Zone Zero. Whether you're a new player, wondering who you should be investing in, or a veteran that's maybe been neglecting some of these other agents that I mentioned. So, I wish you all good luck in getting whichever agent it is that you decide to pull on though. Otherwise, thank you all for watching to the end. As always, liking, commenting and subscribing is greatly appreciated, and it'll also keep you notified for when I live stream my own pulls once the patch drops. But until next time though, bye bye!